Let's go!
Classic hype check, Marvel vs. Capcom 2. I don't think right now is the craziest possible situation for Marvel. I feel like Marvel 2 was at its peak a bit earlier this year when it was announced for EVO. And that was a pretty damn big deal, the fact that Marvel 2 was coming back in some way. Officially, it also meant a lot of things like, oh, if that means this, then it means that. If that means that, then this means this. It led me to hope a lot that potentially something could be happening in the future for Marvel. And considering that this machine right here, I just pointed at the Predator's dick, I'm sorry. The reason this machine over here exists is because Capcom and Marvel in some ways don't completely hate each other after Marvel Infinite. So there was an interesting culmination that, oh my God, suddenly, of all things, Marvel 2 is in the limelight again. Marvel 2 has come back to EVO in some way. And is it going to be this sort of, you know, just a retro game? This is weird because this is what I kind of wanted from EVO. I wanted EVO to have like a retro game every once in a while. Some Third Strike, some Super Turbo, things that made EVO sort of what it is today. Even Smash Bros. Melee is a great example. I would have loved to see that. Maybe this is the beginning of that, but for a lot of these games to show up in official EVO capacity in some way, there has to be like approval. It was one of the reasons why Marvel Infinite did not show up at EVO, according to the people that run the event. It was because of the parties not agreeing with each other. So that led to a lot of like, oh crap, is there something? Is there something? And I think it's a genuine, very low chance that something could potentially be happening in the background. Like I said, and I've said many times, I think the chance of Marvel vs. Capcom 4 existing in some way is like 14,605,1. And I think Marvel 2 happening is like 1 in a million. I think those games coming back in some way after the fiasco of Marvel Infinite is really low. However, it does really seem like there has been a resurgence of Marvel from a lot of community members over the past few years, and especially Marvel 2. And I think that's the best way to do it. What has happened, community members like Yipes has been organizing these awesome tournaments that bring classic Marvel heads in. They get big prize pools from folks that are literally just community members, donating and for the cause to make it as big as it is. And even compared to giant official events for big AAA fighting games that exist now and have some of the biggest audiences there are, prize pools for Marvel 2 were bigger because there was more support. It's genuinely nuts. So why do a hype check on Marvel vs. Capcom 2? Because this game has legacy. Right, Marvel 2 is in such a unique situation, and I've spoken about this for years, of why Marvel 2 is the way it is and what has brought us to the current state that it's in right now, which is, number one, extremely loved, number two, still played to this day by a very large community, and number three, actually unobtainable on current generation or even previous generation consoles. The only way you can get Marvel 2 is if you go retro, and I hate calling the Dreamcast retro, but it is. Picking up the Dreamcast version of Marvel 2. Because people love the shit out of this game. If you're gonna talk about legacy fighting games, there are so many people that are like, what is the greatest fighting game of all time? And I'm talking casual, right? Very casual level. Ask people what's the best fighting game of all time. A lot of them would say Smash Bros. Melee or something like that. But if you're talking traditional, classic, old fighting games, many people will say Marvel 2. And why do people say that? The roster. Marvel 2's roster was one of the first fighting games to have just this insane dream level. Everyone's in this game. Like, this game was just arcade heaven when it came out. So much shit about Marvel 2 was just, we're just gonna throw the kitchen oven, the kitchen sink, and here's a bathtub into the game, and we're gonna hope it works. Guess what? It doesn't, but you genuinely have a game that reaches levels that very few fighting games actually could. And that's why Marvel 2 is kind of special. It still plays very well. It still doesn't have a lot of the modern fighting game aesthetics that you would hope, you know, would make its way through gameplay-wise. My God, man, it is so much fun playing MVC2 and still making up crazy teams. Are all those teams possible to make the game a balanced, fun experience? It's not. It's one of the most horrendously broken fighting games ever, but it's broken in the same ways that Smash Bros. Melee is broken, where the busted elements of the game can actually contribute to some characters, can actually make them more interesting based on team compositions, and it's got that old school fighting game jank where the problems of the game can actually give the game a second win. where if it didn't have that stuff, it would potentially die and no one would be interested anymore. It's curious how some fighting games don't need true balance. Classic games like Smash Bros. Melee, classic games like Third Strike and Marvel 2 and even Super Turbo are the prime definitive examples that balance doesn't make fighting games. Doesn't make fighting games fun. Horribly unbalanced fighting games is genuinely not cool, but when you strive for balance, I think that's just not as... You sort of lose what makes fighting games interesting. Balance is overrated. A fighting game will find its balance through its player base. And if things are horribly wrecked, then people can go back in and fix shit. Marvel 2 is like the defining example of that. They have characters, there's like 6 characters in the game that just wreck everybody else, but it's still possible for strategies to appear. It's still possible for people to show up with some stuff and figure shit out. Would it be great if Marvel 2 came back in some way and it was balanced in some way? It would, but that wouldn't make people happy. That would be like the thing that keeps people away from it. It's one of those like shining beacon games. And that's why it's still special to this day. That's why there's still people that play it to this day. It's hard to get people off of Marvel vs. Capcom 2 because of how much freedom its system provides. There is limitations with some characters, absolutely, but there's so much crazy shit. I can't even tell you how awesome it is to go watch somebody like Lockdown playing Strider Doom and seeing them do stuff that I've just never seen before. What the hell? Like, I thought we had this game figured out, man. And I love it. I absolutely love it. I'm not even the best at Marvel 2. Like, it's actually hard for me to acclimate my brain to go back to MVC 2 because it's got such a crazy neutral. It's genuine lightning in a bottle. The craziest part about it, as we said, it's unobtainable. You cannot get this game. It was only last available on Xbox 360 and PS3, and the download codes for that game, because it wasn't physical, are no longer available. And that's the weirdest part, is that things like licensing issues, things like Disney, have just made the game non-acquirable over the years. And the weirdest part is that we brought back UMVC 3 when Marvel Infinite was coming out, but no Marvel 2. The craziest part is that I'm hoping that Marvel 2 existing in EVO in some way can sort of contribute and lend itself to getting that community spirit back, to showing the fact that, oh, so many people care about Marvel 2, so many people care about this franchise that has not been available in the longest time. I don't see a situation where Marvel 2 shows up on a system like the Switch, much less PC, current gen, next gen, whatever, and not making a ton of people happy. I think that's just the way to go. I think it's the best way to go to sort of reinvigorate Marvel vs. Capcom as a series, because it's what they did back in 2009. Before Marvel 3 was out, Marvel 2 sort of championed Marvel 3 in many ways, even though it was in development, and showed Capcom and Marvel of the like that a lot of people give a shit about Marvel vs. Capcom as a series, and especially Marvel 2, and it sold super well. For Xbox 360, PlayStation Network games, and how they sell, Marvel 2 sold incredibly well for Capcom. And that was a good barometer. I really genuinely hope that anybody at Capcom, much less Marvel Games, is still paying attention that when those companies are like asking people about what do we do next, that they get asked about Marvel vs. Capcom all the time. People genuinely care. The Marvel vs. Capcom series and even Marvel 2 represent a big part of like dreams coming true. And it didn't happen for MVCI for obvious reasons. But if MVC 2 was to come back in some way, I genuinely feel this is the direction that this series needs to go in. We need to remind people why Marvel's great, why people have such a passion for this shit. And MVC2 is the culmination of that, right? I even think MVC2 is even more so than Ultimate Marvel 3. Ultimate Marvel 3 is fantastic, but MVC2 holds like retro nostalgia and also showing new players why it was cool and why there's so many memes about it and everything like that. I think Marvel 2 is the game, right? And one of the saddest things about the latest versions of Marvel vs. Capcom, especially, you know, MVCI, it didn't cherish that legacy. Marvel 3 did, you know? You saw the cool box art, all this crazy stuff. It seemed MVC3 loved Marvel vs. Capcom, and it seemed Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite was trying to pave a bold new cinematic direction revolving around Marvel Cinematic Universe and everything like that. It wasn't what people wanted out of Marvel vs. Capcom. I feel there's people paying attention at some point, you know, at Capcom to try to get fighting games back. My God, dude, can we make that game Marvel 2? Marvel 2 is the game to be Capcom presents and bring it back in some way. All I'm saying is that there's a lot of people that give a shit about this series. There's a lot of people that give a shit about these characters. There's a lot of people that want to see them go up against each other. I still think the iconic imagery of Cyclops and Ryu shaking hands is huge. right? I think that still holds up to this day. And I feel that if they don't do something with that, it's a giant missed opportunity of potential sales, because people have been unable to purchase Marvel vs. Capcom 2 and actually make money for the adjacent companies like Marvel Games and Capcom to pay attention to those sales for over 6 years now. It's been a decade since Marvel 2 has been re-released. A decade. Actually, a decade and a year. 11 years. Let's hope there's something for the future of Marvel vs. Capcom, and that Marvel 2 is the spearhead. Marvel 2 should be the spearhead going forward, and I think anything Marvel vs. Capcom should use that as an example, also taking the franchise in whatever direction it might be. I'm still looking forward to seeing what they're going to do with EVO and Marvel vs. Capcom 2. It was clearly, if you want to talk about all the announced games that were at EVO this year, the game that made everyone freak out the most of all the announced games at EVO this year was Marvel vs. Capcom 2. It blew the lid off everyone. Like, what is going on? It genuinely was amazing. I hope that lights a fire under Marvel Games and Capcom. Hopefully get them to pay attention, because EVO does a lot for the fan base. It does a lot for everything. And the fact that EVO is going to be a much different situation now is going to be weird and tricky. I hope MVC2 isn't left by the wayside until like next year or some shit like that. So either way, I love Marvel 2. I love playing it. It's got some of my favorite characters in fighting games ever. Jill, Strider, Amingo. Let's just hope we can get a true remaster or a revival of the game in some way. Let's get one of these cabinets, but have it be Marvel vs. Capcom 2. And as on a personal note, I had to go through many years of people hating Marvel vs. Capcom because of what MVCI's damage did. As much as I love that game and I love the way it plays, it genuinely tarnished the Marvel vs. Capcom brand and should have just buried anything. But somehow Marvel 2 feels relevant again. A lot of people are memeing about it. It's got jokes, it's got relevance in the eye that I never thought it could. And it's a game that needs to come back. Please, dear God, when's Marvel? I hope it's gonna be sooner than later.